name is Jackie Carnes, and growing up with a mother with epilepsy has not been easy. As a teenager, my father passed away and left me to be the sole provider and caretaker for my mom. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the medication alone to control seizures can cost thousands of dollars a month. I would sell my clothes, furniture, even mine and my mom's jewelry just to pay for her medication. As the years passed, it seemed like her seizures were more frequent and the side effects from the medications were just getting worse. The fear you have as a caretaker is very real. You fear not knowing when the next one will take place, how long it will be, how many there will be. You fear them falling or accidentally hurting themselves from something as simple as holding something sharp or hot, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. However, connecting with the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan has completely changed my mom's quality of life and mine. She's not just existing anymore, she's living and thriving. The foundation gave us the tools and resources we needed and connected us with the top doctors in the U.S. None of that would have been possible without people like you supporting the foundation. Your giving directly affects the lives of those suffering from epilepsy. Look within yourself and know that you have the ability to directly change someone's life forever and give them a new meaning to the word hope.
Hello, my name is Matthew Sutchin, and I have had epilepsy since I was 7 years old. I'm now 29, I'm married, I just bought a house with my wife, and we still live with my epilepsy. Luckily, I have amazing people surrounding me with my family and friends and my wife, and she has learned to deal with it over the past many years, and deal with it kind of just means that we have made a new normal. We only, have one car, and we've just learned to live with that because we don't have any drive that often. I work from home at times, and that's just part of what our new normal is like. Your life has been a bit different, but that's why there's resources like the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan. They are a great resource to find out information about epilepsy. It's also a great resource to find out more about your epilepsy, about different medicines, about resources on how to help you in your normal life.
My name is Heather Maurer, and I'm the proud mama to 3 beautiful children, Mia, Emerson, and Timmy. Like so many, my husband Tim and I found ourselves faced with a terrifying fear during the very early hours of St. Patrick's Day 2013. We were experiencing something we knew nothing of. Our Emmy, just shy of 2 years old, was having her first seizure. After a 911 call and an ambulance ride, we were told that Emmy had a febrile seizure. But she'd be fine, nothing to worry about. We were sent home, and after confirmation from our pediatrician, we didn't give it a second thought. Epilepsy was not on our radar. Thankfully, Emmy was fine, until Christmas Eve 2014, when she was rushed to the hospital yet again. Only this time, it was much worse. Upon arrival at the hospital, our sweet Emmy suffered massive, uncontrollable back-to-back seizures. In the world of epilepsy, this is referred to as status epilepticus and is incredibly dangerous. In the emergency room, the doctors weren't sure if they could help her. We were quickly ushered out when doctors began shouting that they were losing our little girl. After spending what seemed like an eternity in that hospital and awaiting results on a countless number of tests, our 3-year-old was diagnosed with epilepsy. To say that we were in shock is an understatement. The fear, worry, and unanswered questions began to spiral out of control. That's when we reached out to the only person we knew who had experience with this disease, Angie May. Without hesitation, Angie immediately led us to the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan. We were given a wealth of information, access to 24/7 helplines, and directed to the most incredible team of specialists. Our questions soon found answers, and our daughter continues to be a strong little warrior thanks to their support. When living with epilepsy, the fear never really goes away. However, there is this wonderful feeling of solace, just knowing that you can count on this group of individuals who are fighting the fight right alongside you. They share a deep understanding of exactly what you're going through. The time, care, and commitment that this foundation provides to the epilepsy community and beyond is overwhelming, which is exactly why they need your support. 1 out of every 26 people in the United States will be diagnosed with epilepsy within their lifetime. Your support will provide the foundation the opportunity to continue to do the good work that they do each day through educational and supportive services. I'm happy to say that after years of medication and testing, Emmy has been seizure-free since that horrific day in December. We know that this can change in the blink of an eye, and we are always on guard. But regardless, we will never stop fighting for a cure. Together, with your support, we will find a way to reach the goal of not another moment lost to seizures.
Hi everyone, my name is Emmy Mowell, and I'd just like to say the Epilepsy Foundation of Michigan is super amazing, and they have helped my family so much. Your support is greatly appreciated.
My name is
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the program thus far. This next session is critically important, given the FDA's role in overseeing all regulatory decisions leading to the approval of drugs and biologics, medical technology products, and diagnostics. And we have the 2 key experts direct from the FDA to inform us about the expanding role of patients in their processes. So I'd like to welcome Annie Kennedy from the Every Life Foundation, who's going to moderate this discussion. Annie, good morning.
Good morning, thank you. So to get us started off, I'd like to provide just a little bit of context for our panel, and then we'll introduce our speakers from the FDA. But Robin and Annie, if you want to turn your cameras on, I think we could probably do that now. So for some context for those who are joining us today, many are probably aware that there has been a real paradigm shift and sea change with the way that our patient communities have been engaging with innovators and regulators over the last decade, most especially. And patients and patient communities are no longer considered just end users of products once developed, but many patients and communities have really become fully engaged citizen scientists. Throughout the product development lifecycle, patients are serving as catalysts in policies and data collection that are helping to inform development, the way that data is being collected, the way that clinical trials are being designed, and really importantly for today's discussion, the regulatory decision-making and the way that the data that's being collected is being integrated into the regulatory decision-making. Much of this is due to landmark legislative and statutory changes, such as the PDUFA cycles, especially PDUFA 5 and 6, and now discussions that we're having around PDUFA 7, and markedly and most significantly, 21st Century Cures that was led thanks to Representative Fred Upton from here in Michigan, who was inspired through meetings with rare disease patient community members and understanding their journeys. And that actually started when he met 2 little girls from Michigan who were sisters who had SMA, and then engaged very deeply with others within the rare disease community, academic researchers, industry, and really deeply delved into understanding what it takes to get a product from initial conceptual stages to a therapeutic delivery. And he and Diana DeGette are again leaning into following through on that implementation, and now looking forward to how we again have a game-changing, paradigm-shifting piece of legislation in Cures 2.0. And those efforts have really yielded deep robust engagement between patient communities, industry, and the FDA. I had the good fortune of being in a listening session with then Commissioner Califf and Janet Woodcock on the day that 21st Century Cures was signed into law. And I was at the FDA that morning, and they were going to be heading to the White House for the bill signing with President Obama. And Janet Woodcock made the remark that when the term patient-focused drug development that had been codified in PDUFA had been coined, they really didn't expect it to take off the way that it had. But that later that day, when 21st Century Cures was going to be signed into law, it would be codified as a part of FDA's mission. And that's really striking if you think about that. And so today we are grateful to have two leaders from FDA who've been a part of the reason that product development and patient engagement within drug and device development has been codified as a part of FDA's mission. They've really been innovators within this space. And we're going to talk about how they have helped to facilitate with their colleagues this paradigm shifting engagement as we, patient communities, innovators, and regulators have worked together to ensure that we could reshape this landscape and make sure that patient communities were at the table to inform what types of data should be considered as meaningful to patient communities. So I would like to invite each of them to provide just a few minutes of introduction of themselves and to provide a little bit of context as to their respective personal experience, their responsibilities within the agency, and their lens on patient engagement through drug and device development, and maybe a little bit of context for the rest of the discussion that we're going to dig into. So I think first I'm going to ask Annie Saha, who's the Director of Partnerships to Advance Innovation and Regulatory Science at the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, or CDRH, at the Food and Drug Administration, to provide an introduction. So Annie, if you could go first.
Thanks, Annie. It's nice to be on a panel with another Annie. As Annie said, my title, so I'm not going to repeat that. And I'm also working in our Digital Health Center of Excellence. So from the CDRH perspective, and of course, broader from FDA, the focus is, of course, on patients and public health. And at the center, when we first sort of updated our vision really starts with the word patients, that patients in the US have access to high quality, safe and effective medical devices of public health importance first in the world. And so with that, that really meant, how do we actually incorporate that perspective into our decision making? And we originally had kind of focused more on the science side of the science of patient preferences and incorporating that as part of our user fee agreements in MDUFA 3 and then subsequently in MDUFA 4. And that was actually really great because we were able to learn from each other as our colleagues and the drug side were really focused on the patient-focused drug development. So we're able to sort of focus on both the qualitative and quantitative and learn from each other. And then from the center's, from the device perspective, from launching the Patient Preference Initiative in 2013, we've continued to determine how do we incorporate that patient perspective, whether it's increasing the use of clinical outcome assessments, including patient-reported outcomes, as well as patient engagement. So part of our 2016-2017 strategic priorities for CDRH was to incorporate the patient perspective and increase that in our use. And we had a goal that 90% of our staff would engage with patients in some way. And that's all staff, not just reviewers, our administrative staff, anyone who works at CDRH, and we actually exceeded that goal and engaged 96% of our staff actually engage with patients in some way. And we've created different engagements for different mechanisms for engagement with patients. That includes, of course, partnering with colleagues across the agency through the listening sessions, the PFDD meetings. We also have our patient and caregiver connection, which is another mechanism where we have 16 patient organizations who are members, where we can survey them about their disease condition, how they're doing in the COVID pandemic situation. We've used our agreements with the American Kidney Patients Association to get their perspective on dialysis. Are they having issues or challenges with that because of COVID-19? I didn't really talk about my role at CDRH, but I've been engaged in part of all the different activities in terms of the strategic priority and patient preference, and work very closely with our patient science and engagement team that was actually really created out of our MDUFA for funding. And we look forward to continuing to engage with patients and incorporating that perspective in our decision making.
Super, thanks, Annie. I should say I'm upset that this is only a 30-minute panel because I feel like we could probably talk all day, and I just made an additional list of questions. But maybe we can move on to Robin's introduction. And I just want to also remind people that if you have questions to submit, please submit them in the Q&A or the chat box. So our other panelist here today, our other esteemed panelist, is Robin Bent. Captain Robin Bent is with the U.S. Public Health Service, and she serves as the Director of Patient-Focused Drug Development of the Patient-Focused Drug Development Program at CDER, which is the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at FDA. So Robin.
Great. Thanks so much, Annie, and thank you all. It's really a pleasure for me to be here today and to have the opportunity to talk to you about some of the work that we've got going on in the Center for Drugs and across the FDA. And just to mention that while we don't have somebody from the Center for Biologics on, both the Center for Drugs and the Center for Devices work very closely with them. So I think that you'll hear about a lot of efforts that we have kind of going together as we move things forward. And so maybe just to start out, I just wanted to define kind of what we mean by patient-focused drug development, with patient-focused drug development being a systematic approach to help ensure that patients' experiences, perspectives, needs, and priorities are captured and really meaningfully incorporated into drug development and evaluation. And as Annie Annie Kennedy touched on earlier, it started with probably about 2013 with the patient-focused drug development meetings, which were really meant to help inform our benefit risk decision making in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research and in the Center for Biologics. And so we started having these meetings where we heard from patients about kind of the burden of their condition and the burden of any treatments that they were currently taking. And it really helped us understand, really provided a very helpful context for us as we were making regulatory decisions. And when we did that, we also learned that there were a lot of other areas that we could improve on, and a lot of other areas that could really benefit from patient input, both internal to FDA to inform our decision making, but also external as part of the medical product development process, whether that's taking a look at your clinical trials and making sure that there is least burdensome as possible to patients, to really having patients at the table kind of helping decide really important components of the medical product development process. And so I'm really excited because I've been a nurse for over 20 years now. Hard to imagine, but for over 20 years now. And so, I think as a nurse, and I still work on the outside as well. You talk to patients, you hear about their needs, but you don't necessarily always see everything kind of incorporated into the process. And I think that this patient-focused medical product development that we've kind of moved forward with, and that Annie Kennedy has been really instrumental in kind of moving forward as well, and so many others. I think that it really has an opportunity to make our science better. And so I'm really excited to be part of this effort, and really happy to be here today. So I'm going to stop talking and get into questions that Annie or others may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. So can we talk a little bit, so you both did a really nice job setting this up in your introductions and talking about some of the ways that the agency has formalized some of these processes and how that's evolved a bit over the last, I think a little bit of what we cited really spans 10 to 12 years, maybe, if we think about those PUFA cycles. But if we can maybe dig into how that's operationalized and what those collaborations look like. And I know we're talking a lot about patient engagement, but this engagement really is federal agents. So FDA, patient communities, and industry is obviously a really key stakeholder here too. And so can we talk about operationally what that looks like within, maybe pull a couple of these examples So how has that engagement changed? So if we look back 12 years from now and then today, as sponsors working with the agency, what does that mean? What are some of the things that we are doing differently when we're looking at how patient experience is being pulled into considerations within product development that we weren't doing a decade ago? And how is that factoring into the decisions within clinical trials and product development and regulatory decision making? So can maybe like go down into the weeds a little bit, and I'll just open it up to whoever wants to talk about that first.
Go ahead.
Well, it's a couple of things. I think some we've figured out how we can more formalize some of our mechanisms in certain ways, and then also creating just our centers created a toolkit of what those different mechanisms look like and kind of what are the types of information you might get out of those different aspects. And certainly, we've seen success stories already. One easy example is in the diabetes space where patient group had come in and the parents had said, we're kind of worried about potential bolus because we think our kid might accidentally hit something on the insulin pump and give themselves additional insulin when they don't actually need it. And that was through the conversations from the stakeholders, from the parents primarily, and then talking to us, FDA and industry. The company made us a new safety feature addition to prevent that unintended bolus based on that patient and parent feedback. And that's a really, a very simple piece of feedback that didn't require a lot more information or a lot of further in-depth, scientific patient preference study to really understand that that's an issue that needed to be addressed.
That's a great example. Thank you, Annie. Robin, do you have examples about how we're operationalizing that, either in conversations with sponsors, conversations just with FDA and patient organizations, just examples to point to and what that looks like?
Sure. So we have our patient-focused drug development meetings, and then we have the externally led patient-focused drug development meetings that are meetings really kind of modeled after the FDA-led meetings, but are held by patient organizations. And from a lot of those, what we've learned is that we aren't always, in our clinical trials, we weren't always measuring endpoints that really mattered to patients. And so, I mean, this was something that was really important for us to learn. And so we're kind of seeing an evolution of the development of clinical outcome assessment measures that are really being developed with a lot of input from patients. So patients are at the table, kind of, they're part of we're doing there's qualitative interviews and other things to really make sure that what we're measuring in trials is something that matters to patients. And so we have different efforts moving forward. We have a standard core clinical outcome assessments grant program where we're funding the development of these core sets of assessments and that really that are developed kind of in conjunction with patients and really reflect what matters to patients. I think we have the critical path innovation meetings. CEDAR has these meetings that allow patient groups and industry and FDA to kind of come together and potentially discuss in a non-drug specific way, really talk about kind of endpoints that matter to the group and good ideas for targeted endpoints and things like that. I think there's just, there's the patient affairs staff has listening sessions, which are kind of more informal discussions between FDA and patient groups to really understand what matters to patients, maybe in a setting that's not quite as large as one of these large public meetings, patient-focused drug development meetings type things, but allows kind of an initial conversation to go on. So I think you've seen kind of, as time has passed, this evolution to really try and include the voices that matter in the process.
That's great. So as we're talking, FDA has obviously had a significant leadership, really has taken the ball and run with this. And there have been some concepts that have come from patient communities that we've brought forward, but then others that FDA has really, through that implementation, taken further. One of the areas is the patient experience data guidances. So there was a series of guidances that came through 21st Century Cures that FDA has really taken to provide some guidance to industry and patient organizations and academics who are developing resources for integration within therapeutic development. And one of the first guidances really and so we can talk about any area of the guidances that you want to underscore for today's audience, but one that I'd like to ask a question around is representativeness. And as we think about clinical trial design and those who are being included in clinical trials and those who maybe are represented in registries and other data sets, I think it was really important as FDA flagged representativeness in that first guidance and sort of really provided some resources to our communities as to how we work with that and how we do that. So would one of you want to talk about the work that your centers are doing around representativeness and the work we're doing collaboratively with other patient organizations to make sure that the data that we're collecting and the measures that we're developing strive to be as representative possible of the disease populations that we're working with. So I'll just open that up.
Sure. So I'll take the first stab at it. And so I think that the guidance series that you're talking about is something that we still have in process, and we're really excited about it because it really does talk about the importance of when you're talking to people to find out what matters to them, people with a specific condition to find out what matters to them. You can't just talk to kind of 4 or 5 people that are the easiest to access, but you really have to try and make make sure that if you're representing, you're getting the feelings and the opinions of kind of the wider range of patients who are going to be included in the clinical trial, and really in the end going to be taking the medicine or using the medical product. And I think that this is really key. And the first guidance really talks about how really to kind of go about doing that. And I think that it's really helpful. I also want to just take a brief opportunity to highlight another guidance that was just recently put out. I want to say it was finalized, I want to say November 13th. I might be off by a day or two on diversity in clinical trials. And it's a similar but different kind of topic, but I think that it's a really important guidance. And within that guidance, in addition to talking about diversity, it also it gives some really helpful hints of how to make clinical trial participation better for patients, less burdensome for patients. And I think that the more we do to try and decrease the burdens that participating in clinical research puts on patients, the better we will do as far as getting representative information and really. That guidance also talks a little bit more about maybe a little bit more liberal inclusion-exclusion criteria. So trying to reach kind of a broader range of patients with a condition to include them in the clinical trial from a health standpoint as well.
Yeah, and I think I'll add just a few other pieces as well. So certainly in our patient preference guidance that we put out in 2016, we included one of the factors for a patient preference study is that representativeness piece, and that's an area that we're continuing to work through and explore. And then I didn't mention this in the intro, but with our patient engagement advisory committee that we also launched a few years ago, we actually recruited people to be members of that panel because our the original people we got was not a very diverse or representative group. And so we took longer to actually stand up that advisory committee because we recognized how important representativeness and diversity is. And then also we have our draft guidance on patient engagement and medical device clinical investigations, where we really do recommend incorporating patient advisors and thinking about those aspects of representativeness and other aspects of the clinical investigation that will make it more patient friendly and ensure that people will actually enroll. Annie, I think you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. I would also flag for those who are also following and engaging in the Cures 2.0 process, that the Cures 2.0 concept paper that came out did also talk about diversity in clinical trials and ways to diversify clinical trials. And so again, this is an area where FDA is leading by example, and there are a lot of other initiatives underway to also expand in these areas. So for those who haven't had an opportunity to review that, that might be something to direct people to look at. We did have a question come in through the chat that I want to get to. So the question for you guys is, does the FDA or any of its centers or divisions keep a list of conditions and related patient advocacy groups so that they know who to contact or when to contact these organizations when trying to engage with patient communities? So essentially, how do we know how to connect with the federal agency? From a patient community perspective, how should patient organizations know when patients should be engaging with the FDA when there are conversations that might impact them? If I can also help answer that too after you guys take the stab at it.
Well, I think the simple answer is to reach out, and certainly our FDA, I think, For Patients page, which is run by the patient affairs staff at the agency level, is sort of the easiest first point of entry and point of contact. And I will say also just one challenge for us, at least on the device side, is even when we do want to engage with patients, or as we might say, people who happen to have a medical device, is that sometimes there's not necessarily a patient organization or group to engage with. So if you're talking, say, a hip implant, a person will say, well, I went in, I got my hip implant, I did my rehab, but I'm not a patient anymore, and they might not be an active member of some group. So that's an area for us where we actually love to see how we could better partner with people to be able to understand sort of the full patient experience.
And so we don't have a list of conditions and related patient advocacy organizations as the federal government. It's kind of a fine line, right, between providing resources for people and endorsing or not endorsing things, or the appearance of endorsement. But what we do have is, if there's been groups that have had externally led patient-focused drug development meetings or something like that, and they've published Voice to the Patient, we do on our PFDD website kind of link to those reports that are publicly available. And as Annie Saha said, really just kind of reaching out, and our patient affairs staff is very helpful with connecting people to the extent possible.
And I would just say, as a member of the patient community and patient organization, the patient affairs staff does a really tremendous job pushing out resources across the centers. So many of our patient organizations work with CDRH, CDER, and CBER. And all of that information is aggregated in one place about workshops and meetings and Federal Register notices that you may want to be aware of. And they also push out a newsletter so that you don't necessarily have to go visit the page regularly. So you can just Google FDA Patient Affairs and find where you need to go to register for that information so that it comes to you. So that, again, I would just promote that information and reinforce what they're sharing.
I would just briefly add that the National Institutes of Health, the NCATS, the National Center for, Advancing Translational Science, has some helpful resources there as well.
And that's actually, Robin, that's great. NCATS has a toolkit also for patient groups. And that toolkit's designed to help patient organizations figure out where to plug in within the drug development enterprise and where the resources are dependent on where you are in therapeutic development and what guidances are appropriate to you, what tools and other partners may have resources for you. And there's a lot of great information so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If there are legal agreements or templates that you could be using from other organizations, they've been linked into there. So that's another great resource. Thanks, Robin, for mentioning that. So looking at the time, I think we're probably going to get the hook pretty quickly. So I'm just going to ask you one lightning round last question. But you guys have mentioned a lot of really tremendous resources. And so I would just like to know, how do we know at the end of the day that this is making an impact? so that patient engagement, we've had this tremendous paradigm shift from patients being sort of on the back wall of meetings to being at the table and engagement with the agency and being working shoulder to shoulder with you. And is there something that you can look to in your daily work that flags this is making a difference, this is making an impact? And it doesn't have to just be one example, but how do we know that this is working and that we need to keep leaning into it further?
I think one thing that we have for both, actually, I guess all the medical products is we do include if there was any patient, whether it's preferences, patient experience data, patient reported outcomes in our decision summaries. So that is one way. We certainly are always looking to get that message out through whatever venue, whether it's venues like this, other meetings, especially also for industry. I know the device industry asks us all the time, well, what are the examples of how it's been used in other cases? So we just want to continue to publicize and get those pieces out. And so we do try to keep our websites up to date, both from the center's perspective as well as the FDA Patient Affairs staff page.
And I would agree with Annie that we do talk about the patient experience data that was included as part of our reviews, but I would also say that there's some evolving literature from people who want to look at actual like number value or dollar value, showing that having patients at the table has the potential to decrease the number of protocol amendments, or partnering with patient groups has the potential to really meet your recruitment goals in a timely manner and things like that. I don't know that's really specific to FDA, but there is evolving literature for those that feel that we want to be able to quantify that as well.
Super. Well, I just want to take a moment to thank you both and all of your colleagues for all that you do and the urgency with which you work to make sure that patient communities don't just feel better, function, and survive, but that we thrive. So thank you for all that you do.
And thank you for what you do too, Annie. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'll concur with Annie's comments in closing out this session. Thank all of you for participating, but I think Annie had it right at the outset when she alluded to the fact that 30 minutes doesn't do justice to all the great work that the FDA is putting in terms of patient involvement, and so perhaps that's something for us to consider, having yet a follow-up session that's nothing but FDA. Always happy to engage with the good folks at the FDA. So thank you for all your hard work on behalf of all patients. So that concludes this session. And if people want to exit this one, go over on the left-hand side of your screen and enter into the next session, where we're going to be talking about speaking to change lives and influencing policymakers about patient matters. So we'll see you in a few minutes.